Heroes are an inspiring group of people. Every one of them, from the larger-than-life comic book heroes you see on the big silver screen to the everyday heroes that let us live the privileged lives we do. Every hero has a story to tell. The doctor saving lives at your local hospital, the war veteran down the street who risked his lives for our freedom, the police officers and firefighters who risk their safety to ensure ours. Every hero is special and every story worth telling, but there is one class of heroes that I think is often ignored. The entrepreneur, the creator, the producer, the ones who look at the problems in this world and think to themselves, you know what? I can fix that. I can help people, and I can make a difference. Then they go out and do exactly that by creating a new product or introducing a new service. Some go on to change the world, others make a world of difference to their customers. Welcome to The Hero Show. Join us as we pull back the masks of the world's finest heropreneurs and learn the secrets to their powers, their success, and their influence, so you can use those secrets to attract more sales, make more money, and experience more freedom in your business. I'm your host, Richard Matthews, and we are on in 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome back to The Hero Show. I am your host, Richard Matthews, and I'm on the line live with Daniel. Daniel, are you there?
I'm here.
Awesome. Glad to have you, Daniel. For those of you who are regular guests or regular listeners on the show, we are currently in St. Louis getting our RV worked on. So if you're hearing any banging in the background, that's the workers outside taking the radiator out of our RV. So that's, fun things that happen when you're running a podcast while traveling. So quick introduction to Daniel. And hopefully I don't butcher this for you. Is it Ameduri?
You nailed it. Ameduri.
Ameduri, perfect. So Daniel Ameduri is a self-made multimillionaire, a full-time skeptic of conventional thought, and a proud father of 3. We were just chatting about that before we got on the interview here. Co-founder of Future Money Trends newsletter and futuremoneytrends.com, which with nearly 150,000 subscribers is the most widely recognized online authority in investment ideas and economic advice. You've been featured in the Wall Street Journal, ABC World News Tonight, and Russia TV Today. Russia Today TV. I read that backwards. Best-selling author of Don't Save for Retirement. I want to hear a little bit about that because I sort of agree. But I probably don't have my reasons as well thought out as you do. And you correctly predicted the collapse of the Lehman Brothers, AIG, and Washington Mutual on Vision Victory, the YouTube channel you launched in 2007, which now has more than 13 million views. And I actually remember Washington Mutual, the whole collapse of that bank, because my dad was an investor in them, and like the whole scandal and everything between Washington Mutual and the bank that I can't remember which bank took them over.
Chase.
Yeah, Chase, and like there was lawsuits and everything, and all my dad's stocks, I guess, preferred stocks or whatever, turned into something. I can't remember exactly what happened, but I remember he told me a whole bunch about it as it was going down. So. Really interesting stuff. So my first question for you, Daniel, is what is it that you're known for now? What's your business like? What is it people come to you for?
Most people come for personal finance advice that is an alternative to what they're typically told, and that is to save for retirement for 30, 40 years. So a lot of people who email us or subscribe are coming from some sort of video or interview or article that I've written about building a life that is focused on cash flow, on buying things that make money.
Absolutely, and that's it's a huge difference. One of the things that I've always been really interested in is how can I build a business that throws off cash to use to buy cash flow producing assets, as opposed to building, a huge retirement savings account, because I don't know. Cash flow to me is really where the meat is for being able to live the life you want.
Well, it's certainly what the wealthy are investing in. And if you look at the wealthy, they're focused on preservation. They're focused on cash flow, multiple sources. And of course, the middle class is focused on this pipe dream that, hey, let's just keep throwing money at Wall Street. And maybe in 30, 40 years from now, we'll be able to tear off the chunks of that savings like a pound of flesh off your own body. It's just, the whole thing is crazy when you think about it. But yeah, I mean, it's just the idea of just speculating and hoping that, hey, I'm going to buy the Dow at 29,000 and hopefully by the time, let's say you're going to retire in 5 years from now. I mean, what's your upside investing in stocks right now? Do you really think stocks are going to 60,000 in the near future? Sure, it's going to happen one day, but I think unfortunately the retirement system has turned the entire middle class into just speculators.
Yeah, and I think like one of the things like when I worked in the corporate world, I got funny looks from our financial advisor that came in to talk to all the employees about our 401k plans and everything, and he would tell us, you could put money into the 401k for whatever reasons, and when you retire, you'd be able to pull back out of it, blah blah blah. The standard pitch you get for 401k, put all your money in here. And I remember I raised my hand. This was like, I don't know, 10 or 11 years ago. And I was like, I got a question for you. And I was like, my question was, why would you invest your money here so basically you get tax benefit. And it's like, I can put money in before it's taxed into 401k, and then it grows tax free, and then you get taxed on the harvest later, right?
Sure.
And I was like, there's strategies that the wealthy use where they get to put money in post tax, and then so it's it gets taxed now as the seed money, and then it grows tax free, and you can pull it out tax free. And I was like, it makes more sense to me to put in money in some of these other vehicles where you can you're not getting taxed on your harvest and stuff like that. And anyways, those kind of questions don't get asked or talked about.
The pitch is that you're going to be in the lowest tax bracket. Screw that. I don't want to be in the lowest.
Yeah, that was the other question that I asked him. I was like, why are you assuming that I'm going to be poor? I was like, I want to be in the highest tax bracket possible when I retire. I don't want to be in the lowest one.
And now with the Trump tax cuts, if you look at the federal income tax, essentially they haven't been this low since like the 1930s, 1931. Mm-hmm. And so now the pitch is with 23 trillion in debt and socialists rising up in this country. The pitch is avoid paying the lowest taxes in practically 100 years, because taxes will be even lower in 20 or 30 years from now.
It's just ridiculous, right? Like, let me put in, post-tax money now, grow it tax-free, and pull it out later. And, I get funny looks from family and friends because I tell people my goal is to have the largest tax bill possible. Like, I want a tax bill that makes other people's yearly income, that's my goal. That's how I look at, growing my business. And of course I would like to figure out how to then reduce that tax bill as much as possible. But like, I want to get to a point where my tax bill is just humongous.
For sure. And I know what you're saying. For the audience, it's like, no, we're not saying we love paying taxes. We're saying if you're paying a lot of tax, you're making a lot of money.
Yeah, it means you got a big business. Something's going right. Right. So anyways, like it's always been interesting the way the stories that we get told in the middle class are not the same stories that the wealthy get told or tell their children and things like that. And so it's really cool that you're teaching in that space. So my next question for you is your origin story, right? We talk on this show all the time. Every entrepreneur has their origin story where you started to realize that, you were different and maybe you could help people. And so what got you started on your entrepreneurial journey?
Well, since I was a child, I've always been interested in entrepreneurship, and my mom has plenty of stories of me getting in trouble at school for selling pencils, trying to undercut teachers, whatever they were selling, or selling candy, doing garage sales, random garage sales. I had an uncle one time worked for Nabisco, gave us a bunch of cookies. I threw them in my wagon and went running down the street trying to sell all of them. So I've always been fascinated with it, always felt destined that I would become wealthy and that would happen. And then I started buying houses right out of the gate. At 18 years old, I bought my first rental property. At 19, I bought my second rental property, invested in my first business at age 16, started buying stocks, and did really well in life, and ultimately did have a crater-sized devastating moment in 2008 with many other people. And that's
a nice big crash.
Yeah, I mean, it even though I accurately predicted it on YouTube 6 months before it happened, I made a bad bet. I bought a lot of silver thinking that the deflationary crisis would be overwhelmed with inflation from the central banks. I was right about a lot of these things, but the results did not happen. Silver did not go to the hundreds of dollars an ounce that I thought it would. It went from $21 to $8.90. So, and then in the meantime, I was being greedy with the real estate market, telling everybody to sell their real estate. And I was out there trying to do, just let me squeeze in a few more flips here in Southern California, and ended up having,
Before the market really dies.
yeah, foreclosures, the whole thing. And it was devastating. So there was a time there where I had let go of that destiny and was just trying not to be poor. And ultimately, it leads me to starting a personal finance blog, website, Future Money Trends, to track what I was doing, my wife and I were doing, on how we were going to become financially independent. And ultimately, that evolved into not only helping people become financially independent, but it also evolved into getting involved in venture capitalism, which it's something I never even considered, but it's a passion of mine, of helping seed
Nice.
round new companies.
That's cool. So the Future Money Trends it's a newsletter subscription.
Yeah, it's a free newsletter. You can get our weekly wealth digest at futuremoneytrends.com. The advertisers pay for basically the website and the cost and everything else. So, and the profit, of course. So it's a free for the users because there is no subscription. There's no paid subscription. You're going to see ads on the website. You're going to see ads in the emails, but you're not going to have to pay for anything. And you're literally getting everything that I did and everything that I'm doing.
That's really awesome. So how did you grow that to a point where it started to attract advertisers?
You know, at first it just started out as building it. And for 6 months, I didn't even think about making money. I was just sharing my story. In fact, going prior to that with the YouTube channel, for 2 years, I was just doing it for free. And it built an audience. And of course, once Lehman Brothers collapsed and all those predictions came true, the channel blew up, became very successful, rolled that momentum into the Future Money Trends letter, and then eventually decided how I was going to monetize. And the first go-to thing was, hey, I'll contact Google and, generate revenue. And then I thought about it. I was like, what if I could make it in a way where I would advertise what I'm also investing in? So, affiliate programs.
That makes a good idea. Good.
Easy. You can
Sense.
contact Fundrise. You can get affiliate link for Fundrise, one of my favorite cash flow places to go to. If I'm doing a venture capitalist deal, I'll say, hey, why don't you guys pay me? You guys can use all of our web banner ads for advertisements. We'll even help you guys do some of your PRs or something. And that's how the relationship would develop. So I would write checks into these companies, but I'd also help run some of their marketing. And so that's how it kind of evolved into a personal finance letter that's mainly focused on cash flow. But about 10% of the letter, we do profile small opportunities in the cannabis space, blockchain, gold and silver, that type of thing.
That's really awesome. So that's your primary revenue driver in your business is the newsletter subscriptions and the advertisements for the newsletter subscribers?
Yes, for the business itself, for Future Money Trends, the primary income monetization for that is the advertisements. However, the majority of personal income I make is actually from the venture capitalism at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine the venture capitalism's big money when you start playing with some of those things. Huge ROIs if you get in early on some of the products and stuff.
Correct. And what I try to do is I try to give the subscribers the same opportunity. So I'll let them know, hey, I'm investing into this company. They're launching today. They're launching next week. It's something that I'll be in for years. Because these companies, especially in the newer companies, they're very volatile. So it's important for people to understand that, look, you don't buy these as day trades. You're not buying Walt Disney. You're buying something that will either go up 10 times or will go to zero.
Yeah, that's sort of the way that businesses work. But it's really interesting because I've seen a number of my own friends that have started businesses and myself, like that first growth, that like growth hockey stick is really big, but the statistics, 1 in 5 businesses fail right in the first couple of years. So you probably invest in several to have the one that takes care of any of the losses and really makes up for all the rest of it, makes big money.
That's true. And I don't invest in a lot. So I'm talking like 5 a year, maybe. So I think also being disciplined is also something that will help protect yourself, because one of the things is every deal that these guys are going to pitch you is always going to feel like the opportunity of a lifetime, and it's going to make you feel like you have to have urgency because you're going to lose money if you don't get in quick. And what I
Yeah,
tell
and
people,
that's the intention of a sales pitch, though.
yes. And so what I tell people is anytime you feel like you're going to miss out, don't do it because you're about to lose money. Anytime you feel rushed to buy an investment, don't do it because you're about to lose money. So anytime that takes over my mind, I usually step back and I kind of just take a breath and, just like they'll tell you, look, you got to let me know by Friday, otherwise you can't get in. Another lesson I've learned is they want your money. So
Yeah.
if you're in the driver's seat when it comes to
Yeah, you're the one with the power. You have the thing they need. So my other question, just sort of related to that, is: are you still in the real estate space at all? Are you doing any investments there, or not since 2008?
So what I do is everything I make for my business, I typically put into the real estate market. So I would say net worth is 50% real estate, but investable assets, it's probably in the 70 to 80% range.
Interesting. Any particular asset class? Are you doing like self-storage, multifamily, single family, industrial? What's your go-to for the real estate holdings?
So prior to 2019, I had single family homes, duplexes, and up to fourplexes. However, in 2019, I decided to upgrade the portfolio. And so I'm almost done with the transition of selling all my houses and all my smaller multifamilies. And I'm transitioning them into commercial real estate holdings, apartments, 30 units and above, type situations, or commercial properties, or going into private funds that perhaps family offices invest in, and maybe owning a sliver of a Costco building or a JW Marriott, that type of thing.
That makes sense. Yeah, remind me when we're off the call. I have some introductions for you because a lot of my clients invest in commercial real estate, so they're always looking for more people that are looking in that space. So that's fun and interesting. So my next question for you has to do with your superpowers, right? So we talk all the time on the show, as an entrepreneur, you have it's what you do or build or off this world that really helps solve the problems for people. And the framing I've been using for this lately is if you were to think through like your skill set and realize, you might have a lot of things that you're really good at or things that you might consider, superpowers, but what I'm really interested in is what's the one thing that you sort of is the common thread between all your skills, right? The thing that empowers everything else and sort of makes you who you are and allows you to do what you do.
I think it's the understanding that I have to deliver more value than people expect, and I put that into the entire company, and I put that into my children. Everything I do, whatever I promise you, I'm already thinking how I'm going to promise you, how I'm going to deliver more. And oftentimes I like to overpromise to put myself in that horrible situation. So I like to put my back against the wall, and I like to overpromise. And then on top of that, I'll over deliver on something I don't even think I can deliver on. But I got to add more. So it's just the ability to focus and stack value to whoever you're trying to serve.
And so I assume you bring that to all of your various businesses too, where it's not just for your newsletter, but also like when you're purchasing the real estate and moving in, and like you just, how can I add value to this transaction?
Absolutely. And I treat all these properties like a Marriott or a JW or a Ritz would treat their customers. When a tenant has an issue, they get it resolved right away. I send Christmas cards and gift certificates for date nights. Now people would say, this is stupid. Why do you do this? Guess what, guys? I don't deal with problem tenants. I don't deal with people. My tenants, their kids send me Christmas cards. Like, I'm not trying to be best friends with people, but I am letting them know that I'm going to treat you great. If you're in my property and you've got a problem, it's going to be taken care of. We're going to make sure these properties are dealt with. Same thing for businesses. Same thing with my newsletter subscribers. If I'm investing in something risky, I will maybe even exaggerate on how risky it is. I'll tell them, look, you could lose all your money, because I want to make sure that when people look at our content or anything that I do, they'll always say, look, he did his best, more than his best, to make sure I was positioned to make money, or to make sure I was positioned to not put myself in a situation where I would lose money or I couldn't stomach the volatility.
Yeah, yeah, and I know, particularly in the real estate space, I know a lot of investors don't always think of their tenants as their customers, right? And so it's refreshing to hear like how you see the business there and see the people that you're transacting with, and how it has to sort of be a win for everyone, or it's not a it's not going to grow and be really good for you. Um, so what the flip side of your superpower is your fatal flaw, right? So just like Superman has his kryptonite, or Batman's not really a superhero, fatal flaw is something that you've struggled with when it comes to growing your business. And I think more interesting than what the flaw is, but what have you done to sort of overcome it, so people who are listening to the show, if they're suffering from the same thing, like they'll learn from you on how you've sort of overcome some of the things that have held you back.
So it's promising too much. And then trying to always be the yes guy for a client or a subscriber. So in the beginning, not even that recently I ended this, but I used to do phone calls with subscribers. And of course, as you can imagine, this would
Yeah,
take a
especially with 150,000 of them.
yes. So people would schedule appointments. Some people would be long-winded. Some people would be very needy. That was a bad idea. I stopped doing that. Now I just communicate through email. With the advertisers or the clients or the investments, I might have tried to have too many. You know, I told you I do 5 a year. Well, in the beginning,
Yeah.
I tried to do 25 a year. And so what I did was I said, okay, how can I cut this down? And what I did was I just created simple rules for myself that would not only help the quality of my life, but get rid of that kryptonite and also enhance the value. So what I did was I made a rule that any company I VC or any company that I charge for advertising that we're also VCing, uh, the most important thing right from the very beginning is the CEO or whoever founded the company, they had to be doing this their second time. So that immediately got rid of a lot of people, because a lot of venture capitalists, I'm not saying these guys are bad, because everybody has to start somewhere, but they
Yeah.
might have been a CPA and now they're running a cannabis company.
Yeah.
They might have been a geologist and now they're trying to run a mining company, which is a totally different beast. So what I did was I cleared all that out and I focused on the 20% or even less than that, who they would come to me and say, I built a billion-dollar mining company and now I'm starting my new one. I launched, cannabis Wheaton, and now I'm building a new cannabis company. So that's what I started doing. I started focusing on people who had already gone through all the mistakes, who had already gone through all the problems, and who had a success. And so that is one of the things I accomplished in my life. And it certainly raised the quality of my business, my life, my investments, by focusing on people who were on their second or sometimes even third or fourth go around.
Yeah, so that's like, it's a really interesting like thought process that you went through there, and it's like how can you trim the fat in your businesses to make your life better, right? So in your newsletter, you're like, hey, I'm spending too much time on the phone, or I'm running into this problem here. So you're like, where can I cut these things out and still get the same or better result for myself and for my clients? And with the venture capital, the same kind of thing. It's like I've got all these investments, but where are the ones that are causing the problems? Right. And I know in business, like you basically mentioned it sort of, right? The 20%, it's like the Pareto principle, right? 80% of your clients are going to cause you, or 20% of your clients are going to cause you 80% of your problems, and 20% of your clients are going to create 80% of your revenue. So how do you just sort of cut it down to the most important things?
Yeah. And I would tell people Pareto's law, 80-20, 20% of the efforts is delivering 80% of the results and vice versa. But then I want you to take it a step further. Reflect on your life, get a clean sheet of paper on your business, on your entrepreneurship, personal finance, whatever you're looking at, do the 80-20, but then I want you to do it again. Then 80-20, the 20 that's left. And now you're down to what is really, truly delivering the maximum leverage, the maximum use, the maximum value in my life. And so I just talked about the real estate. I had all these properties, and some of them, they get 2 tax bills each one. They got insurance. It became kind of difficult to keep track of. And it was always there's a lot going on. And so in order to focus on quality control, that's what I did. Was I basically took 20% best properties. And then I 80/20 that. I kept a handful of them, but the rest of them, I'm like, I'm getting rid of everything else. Everything else is going into these funds that I don't have to do anything. And again, I didn't partner with the newest, latest thing at fintech that just launched in 2018. I went to companies like Watt Funding, who, been around since the 1960s. They've gone through multiple recessions, multiple real estate crashes. And of course, the most important criteria, anyone you're investing with in real estate, they better have gone through that 2008 crisis. I want somebody with a deep scar on their face from that 2008 crisis, because it's those guys who are not going to blow up on the next crisis.
Yeah, they know what's going on. Yeah, and so you sort of, like, in the real estate space, for our listeners who are not terribly familiar with it, there's two big sides to it. In the investment space, you have the people who are doing the work of the investing, right? This person who's buying the house or buying the property, and I call it the I'm gonna see if I can get this word right. The one who sort of like puts everything together, the deal maker, right? And then you have the other side, which is the investor, which you're talking about, where someone who generally puts up the money for the deal. And so it sounds like you're making that transition where you're the one who is doing the deal making and putting the property together and taking care of it and managing it and getting in front of a property manager and all that kind of stuff, to being the money that's funding the deal. So you're getting a smaller slice of the pie, but you have none of the work. Is that sort of the transition that you're making?
Absolutely. And it's raising the quality of the deals too, because let's be real, I can go out and buy all the duplexes I want, but me owning a slice of a Costco building, it's really not in the cards for me right now. However, I can join with a group and have Costco and Walgreens and Chevron and McDonald's be my tenant.
Yeah. Those are the single tenant leases.
Yeah, because I mean, would you rather have a tenant of an individual home that let's say they're paying $900 a month, or would you rather have JP Morgan as your tenant? I mean, or the IRS?
I mean, they'll stay there forever.
Yeah.
I was just looking at a couple of things in Marietta, actually. Some of the properties there that are for sale with single tenant leases, and it's amazing how much revenue those things can generate. But they're top tier properties, so they cost a lot of money to invest in, like a lot of money. So it makes sense that you're going in with groups and getting a piece of the pie.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to just jive with you for a little bit, because it's not something we've gotten to discuss on this show a lot. But one of my favorite things about real estate investing, particularly with like commercial real estate and making that transition into the investor side, is how the money actually works for people. So I'm going to just lay some numbers out here from one of my other clients that I thought was really, really fascinating to sort of get your opinion on it and see what your thoughts are. But they were talking about it was a multifamily deal that they were buying, right? An apartment. And so the deal maker person, the one who was buying the deal, was buying an apartment property. I can't remember the numbers exactly, but it was like they were buying it for $1 million. And they were going to put about another $1 million into the property. So all in the property, they would be in about $2 million. The bank, they were loaning something like 80% loan to value. So they had 800,000. So they needed to raise the $200,000 extra for the price, and then the $1 million they were going to put into it. So they had to raise $1 million and 1.2 from from investors. And so they raised the 1.2 from investors for the property because they knew the turnaround for it. It was worth probably about $5 million when they were done. And so those all sound pretty good. But what was really fascinating to me was the person who put up the cash. They don't do anything in the deal, right? Like they just put up the money, and they had a 12-month turnaround where they were able to turn the property around in 12 months and get it up to its highest and best use and all those things. And then they do a cash out refinance on the money. And so the cash out refinance, they pay back the investor. He gets his 1.2 back. They pay the banks back, and they've got they just have the new loan on the property, and then it's cash flowing. The investor had an equity position because of the money he put up. So he gets his 1.2 back, and then for the next 5 years, which was the plan for the property, he makes 10% cash flow on that. And then at the end of the property, now it's not worth it's not worth whatever it was. Now it's worth like twice that price, right? And they sell it, so they pay back the bank, and then they split the he gets his cash flow there. So the person who put up the money over the course of 5 years he got his money back really quickly, right? 12 months. He gets his 1.2 million dollars back. Plus he gets cash flow for 5 years. Plus he gets the 10% or whatever of the sale price at the end. And to me, that's just like, that's a really, really cool way to talk about like how you can make your money work for you, like at a really high level. Because a lot of people don't ever like see that side of the transactions and the money, and how it actually works for people. And that's sort of what you're talking about doing is getting your money in and making those kind of plays. Is that right?
Absolutely. And I love the way you described it, because two things there. For people with money, you should demand a return on your investment. First of all, people have forgotten about that. When my wife and I were building our personal passive portfolio, income portfolio, we had an expectation that if it wasn't sending us money every month or every quarter, we would not buy it. So no speculating, only buying things that bring income into the house. Secondly, in that story, anyone out there that doesn't have money, consider the other side. Somebody structured a deal without any money. They just structured a great deal and the money will come. I always tell people that you really don't need money, because if you can make a deal, structure a good deal, rich people want to invest. There's no rich person or group out there that's just loving holding cash. They just want to get that cash and let it sit there and do nothing. No, that's not how they
want to put it to work for them.
They want to put it to work, man. I'd love to get, somebody to come and, tell me, oh, look, there is a great property in San Diego. It's worth $3 million, but we can buy it for 1.8, but I need 300 grand. He'd get 300 grand right now. Like, let's do this. This is a no brainer. So you can always find money, but you have to be willing to do the work to get the deal. And then for you people have money, my goodness, stop buying things that have to go up and just start focusing on the cash flow. Inflation and time will take care of the appreciation.
Yeah. And it's just fascinating to me that it works so well for both sides of that, right? So if you're the one who's putting the deal together, you can always find the money for a good deal, right? So you don't like that. I know it's a question that investors, people who want to be investors, always ask. Like, I don't have the money for it. Well, you don't have to have the money. Money exists. There's so much money. You couldn't even shake a stick at it, right? It's just everywhere. And so but on the other side, once you've made it, right, when you have the cash from things that you're doing, you can step out of the work and just let the money do the work for you. And create cash flow and do all those other things. So it's really fascinating to me the way that whole world of finance works. It's really fascinating when you see that, like, you can compare that to like the story we started the interview off with, which is, you put your money in the 401k and in 40 years, maybe the stock market went up and maybe you'll have money, right? Sure. Or maybe not. Right, like my grandpa lost most of his retirement because he retired in one of the big market crashes in the 80s, right? And so he didn't have anything. And it's speculation versus like learning how money actually works.
Yeah, and it's good to condition your mind too in buying income, because that is what the wealthy do. And don't wait to become wealthy and then start investing like that. Start investing in that like right now, and watch yourself become wealthy.
Yeah. And it's, it's like you once you sort of learn some of those strategies, you realize that like there's just a whole nother set of rules that you're never taught. Like what do they call them? The cash flow banking, where you can basically put money into whole life insurance policies and then loan those to yourselves, and it'll continue to earn 8% while you put it into an investment that also earns 8%. So you can like stack interest while you're buying things. It's just, there's just a whole different game that you play, that wealthy people play, that it's not even like you have to be wealthy to play that game. You just have to get the knowledge. Like, you have to find out that those things are available, which I assume is what your newsletter teaches, right?
Yeah, I
people how to do those things.
I have 18 of those whole life policies that you're referring to, and I'm actually, before you called, I just texted the agent. We're setting up the 19th policy. But yeah, I've
only got one so far. I got a ways to go.
Well, it's something that, of course, the middle class has no clue about. but they call these the rich man's Roth. And yes, cash flow, Bank on Yourself, Nelson Nash, and then Pamela Yellen, Bank on Yourself. But you can get educated in those, and I highly recommend them to be able to dual compound. And it's a great place if you're going to have cash, store the cash there.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like I had someone gave me a middle class example of how they work, which I always thought was really fascinating. So for our listeners, this was really funny to me. Is like a normal person in the middle class will go out and buy a car, right? So like they would buy a car, like say a BMW. They got a really good resale value. They're a really nice car. Say it costs 30 grand. They go out and they get a loan for 30 grand from the bank, and then they use the car. They pay it off over the course of 5 years. At the end of the 5 years, they sell the car. So they spent, whatever the cost of the car is plus interest. It cost them $36,000 for the car. They're out $35,000, and they sell the car. They get a portion of their investment back, right? They might get a couple of grand back from it, but they're all in. They're probably minus like $15,000-$20,000 from where they started. And is like same situation using the cash flow banking. A wealthy person might pull out the 30 grand from their cash flow banking thing, buy the BMW with it, and they pay themselves back plus interest. All right, so they've got the BMW for the 5 years. They pay themselves back while it's being used. The $30,000 is still in the cash flow banking, earning at 6 to 8% a year. So you're paying it back plus interest. So you're getting another couple of points that you're paying back into it. And at the end of the 5 years, you still have the BMW. You can sell that, whatever it's worth. Say it's still worth $10,000 or $15,000. You can add that on top of it. Now, instead of at the end of the 5 years, you have the 8% interest you earned on the money that stayed in the policy, what 5% interest you paid yourself back plus $15,000 for the car. You've made significantly more money, plus you got to use the car for 5 years. And it's just a different game that people play. And they're like, that's on a depreciating asset. Like, imagine what happens if you start using that money to purchase something that's actually appreciating in value and creating cash flow while you're doing it. Right. So it's one of those things that, it's like an unfair advantage to just continue to grow your wealth.
I look at it as a flow through. So if I'm going to make a major investment into something that yields, let's say 8 to 10%, I first throw it through a whole life policy. And then I just simply borrow the money right back in a policy loan, and I throw it in that investment that I wanted to put it in anyway. So now I'm making 10% on one side and say 7% on the whole life policy. Now it does have a 4.5% interest only on the policy loan, but people, it's very complicated what we're talking about, everybody.
Yeah.
You don't get it. This took me like 4 or 5 months to finally
figure out how it worked. I had to like put out Excel spreadsheets together and sort of like try and figure out how it was going down.
And then to add the confusion is that it's a whole life. Like to really truly understand this, we are not buying life insurance for life insurance. We are the largest holders of these policies, Wells Fargo and PNC Bank, Bank of America, Walmart. So we're not buying these for life insurance. We're buying these as a place to store cash. So it's tier 1 capital that you have access to, that you could use to dual compound.
Yeah. The dual compounding is the thing that just blows my mind, because you can stack interest. And what is it? Albert Einstein said, like, compound interest is the greatest force of nature.
Yes.
And you can stack that, which is, it's just fascinating to me. So I look forward to the time in my life when I've got 19 policies going and running investments through them. So just out of curiosity, how do you, because and this is just my own naivete on this subject, I thought you could only pull out like one policy on a particular person. How do you pull out that many? How does that work?
So the way I understand it, you can get a life insurance value up to 15 times your income. That is for the regular one. There's actually another one, a super secret one called premium life financing, where you could actually get like 60 times, but that's a whole complicated thing to not get in there. But no, as long as your income, you take your annual income and times it by 15, that's how much life insurance you can get.
Okay, so you can actually pull out more than one policy then if you haven't hit that cap?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. See, I just
And by the
misunderstood that
way,
then.
my kids all have 2 policies each as well. So
Nice. Yeah.
they have one policy where I pay something every year, and then they have one policy where I did something called a one and done. And I've also done this for myself. And that's where you literally just give the whole life company a big chunk of cash and it's done. You never pay out, you never pay again ever. It just goes up every single year contractually. And the whole life policy holders, like a REIT, the profits from running the mutual insurance company are being distributed in the form of a dividend to the whole life policy holders. So I just want everybody to understand that you're actually making money from the insurance company doing the business of insurance. And of course, insurance is the best business in the world because you're taking payment and you may never have to provide a service. There is no other business like this where you take
Yeah.
money and you potentially never have to give them anything.
Yeah. It's really fascinating that, that it even exists that way. So I just had things beeped at me.
It's how Berkshire got wealthy, right? Like,
Yeah.
they'll talk about it. They had all this pool of capital just sitting there. And they're like, well, let's just use this money that's sitting there. And so, of course, they were able to dual compound by running Geico.
Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so, anyways, for those of you listeners who are interested in this topic and want to get more into it, we'll post some links to some of the books that you mentioned. That's because the Bank on Yourself is the book that I read that sort of got me started into that. So we'll make sure there's links in the show notes for it. It's a huge topic, and if you're interested in how you can do some of that, we'll make sure there's links in here. So you can start looking at some of those policies because it's such a huge topic for this kind of interview, but it's really, really fascinating when you're talking about how you build and compound wealth. It's sort of like black box tools of the rich, right? How they actually manage and work with their money because they don't do it the same way that you and I do, right? A normal people, they don't, we put it in banks, right? And, earn 0.5% interest from our savings account that's being eclipsed by the, the inflation. So,
and you and I didn't even mention so many of the benefits. I mean, these things are lawsuit proof, even from the IRS, as long as you haven't done anything illegal. They are tax free if the money after you die is going to your family. So I mean, there are many,
and you because you put in after tax dollars, they can't tax it because it's already been taxed. So you're not taxed on your harvest, right? You're not taxed on the growth, which is just fascinating to me. Because that's not the way most people do it. Most people are like, hey, I get to put in my money before it gets taxed at the paycheck level. And then, after it grows to $100,000, then it gets taxed, which doesn't seem like it's a benefit to the person who's doing the investing that way. But yeah, there's a lot of cool things that, and I know that, even when you take the loans out on them, the loan proceeds are not taxable. And, when if you do actually die, the death benefit pays the loans back. And then anything that's left goes to your beneficiaries. There's a lot of things that happen with the whole life insurance policies that are really worth taking the time and looking into.
Sure. And when people do a loan, it's not as if they're doing a credit report or anything. Your cash is the collateral. You can only borrow 95% of your cash value. So there's zero risk of default. So if you want $100,000 and you got $100,000 in cash value, you just call them up and say, send me the $100,000. Here's my name. Here's my account. They don't ask any questions. They just AC.
The last time I did it, I had a program I wanted to invest in. And I was like, I needed $3,500, and I just called them up and said, hey, can you send me a check for $3,500? And 2 days later, the check was in my mailbox.
Exactly.
Right? No questions asked. And then you can just pay it back, right? I put it into an investment. We made like $60,000 over the course of the next few months. We paid it back, but it's really, really easy as opposed to going to a bank where they have to, pull your credit report and they deny you for this or that or the other thing, or, you have to after 2008, you're probably really familiar with this. It used to be before 2008, you could, fog a mirror and you could get a loan. After 2008, it was like really strict. Like I even have a hard time. We make good money, but they're like, your money is not W-2 money. It's it's K-1 money or whatever from, tax standpoint. So it doesn't count. We can't give you a loan.
Yeah.
So,
by the way, if you're traveling all the time, you need to make your residency in another state.
I totally do. It's currently still in California, which is insane.
Seriously, go get a
uh,
house in Texas or
yeah,
Nevada.
it's like I
Texas.
need. Yeah, Texas is the I've we have a secondary residence address in South Dakota, and the only reason we have it in South Dakota is because they don't require um, inspections on the vehicle every year.
Mm.
Texas does, which is like, we like the income and their homeschool laws and everything, but like we'd have to plan our trips around making sure we made it back to a Texas inspection station every year.
So I was a Texas resident for 5 years. It's every other year.
Every other
And
year.
you love this. It's $50 no matter what you drive. Whether you're driving a Lamborghini or a Honda, it's
Yeah,
$50
yeah.
off.
California is like, it doesn't matter what you're driving, it's $800.
Yeah, yeah. Nevada's really bad in their car registration as well, but they have
Yeah.
no income tax.
Cool. So let's move on just a little bit, and I want to talk about your common enemy, right? So, and let's this makes more sense if we frame it in one of your businesses. I know you've got several businesses, so let's frame this inside of your newsletter subscriber business. And it's the one thing you could remove from your client's life. If you had a magic wand and you could just remove something that you know is holding back your subscribers from actually getting the results they're looking for, the thing that you see, questions that you see popping up all the time that you wish you could just solve for everyone in like one go, then what do you think that would be?
It's trying to get people, the subscribers, to understand the difference between risk and volatility. We make investments, things go up and down, but that doesn't make them risky. If I owned Disney stock, there is 0% chance that Disney is going to zero. If I own a rental property in La Jolla, 0 chance the property is going to zero. But it does not protect me from volatility. Disney could go from 150 today to 100. People will be puking and thinking all kinds of crazy thoughts. But they really need to step back and say, wait a minute, is this risk that's happening? And I'm being volatility. And that is probably the biggest thing that I have to help people with, because in 2008, I had a duplex, go from 130 grand down to 65 grand. And that duplex, the rent went from 1,000 to 1,300 during about a 24-month period. The volatility was high, but I lost nothing. I actually made more money because of the cash flow. So it's the volatility, and I would say definitely getting people to start focusing on cash flow and not speculation when it comes to the subscribers.
So how do you sort of learn the difference between volatility and the I already forgot the other thing you mentioned,
Risk.
but so versus volatility and risk? I
try to focus on teaching people to ask themselves, will my grandkids be doing business with this company if I'm going to invest in it? Or could my children live in this property in 30 years from now? This is a desirable area. Really focusing on, now, if we do a deal, there's real risk and there's volatility. It's going to be extremely volatile and you could lose all your money. But, if you've, on the flip side, if let's say you just bought the S&P 500 on the Vanguard, it's not going to zero. I mean, the 500 strongest companies in the US, they get swapped out, by the way. Everybody's like, why does it always go up? Well, guess what? It ain't even the same 500. It's like only 80 of them are left that are original 500. Every June they clean them out. They get rid of the weak ones and they bring in new ones that are strong. So it's things like that, yes, but the S&P 500 could crash tomorrow and go to 1,500. But does that mean Google and Apple are going away? No, there's no risk.
I mean, they have humongous businesses, and just in Apple's case, Apple is being undervalued a lot because based on their actual revenue projections.
Sure.
And like that's probably the case for a lot of businesses, just because of the political environment we're in.
Absolutely.
So the other side of that, if the common enemy is something that you're removing from your life, your driving force is the thing that is the thing you fight for, right? So just like Spider-Man fights to save New York, or Batman fights to save Gotham, or we just mentioned Google fights to index and categorize all the world's information. What is it that you fight for in your businesses?
Well, with my subscribers specifically, I really like to teach, and I enjoy helping people realize that the financial path that's been laid out in front of them is not written in stone. It's not even that old. It's an experiment, and perhaps a failed experiment when it comes to retirement. So unlocking the potential of the subscribers and letting them realize that they could chart their own course. Certainly that is my drive when it comes to my subscribers. When it comes to like the real estate side of my business, I'm focused like a laser, and my drive is how do I keep stacking more income? Every week, I hope to have more income coming into my life.
That's a really interesting goal, right? Because I know one of the things that I get questioned on all the time by my family and my social circles that are not in the same like entrepreneurial circles that I'm in is this idea that, why would you look at things that are beyond your means, right? Like one of the things my wife and I do all the time is we do just because I think it's fun, right? We'll go places into like the rich area of town and like look at the mansions that have the open houses, not because we're particularly looking to buy one right now, but just because I think they're cool. And we'll go and do some of those things. And we go to the yacht shows and look at yachts and things like that. My dad always asks me, he's like, why do you look at stuff you can't afford? And I'm like, what makes you think I can't afford it? Right? Like my life has always been, it's like, how can we adjust the income to afford the things we want to afford? Right. So we bought this RV and started doing the traveling. And it was, when we started, it was outside of our income. Right. But we just adjusted the income to match. And, next step, I told you, we're talking about traveling around the world, and, we've got an idea of like how much it's going to cost to do that. And you can just, your income is not set in stone if you don't want it to be. Right. And that's where, most people, I think they look at their lives and they're like, hey, I have a job, it makes 50 grand a year. So they try to fit their life into 50 grand a year instead of trying to figure out how to, like, here's the life I want to build. How do I build an income that supports it?
That's beautiful what you just said. Designing your life instead of just accepting this cookie cutter life plan that we've been given.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like it's just a mental shift, right? There's nothing stopping you from doing that, right? It's just a change in your own mindset to think, how can I, and I think it comes from I think one of those really important, like, just concepts people have to learn, is to learn to ask themselves better questions, right? So if you're asking yourself, how can I afford my life, right? Then you're asking yourself a poor question, right? Instead of asking yourself, how can I design my own life, and then how do I make build an income that matches that you start unlocking things for you. You start asking better questions and you start getting better answers.
Yeah, I mean, if people just do that one fundamental shift right there, what you're talking about, just focusing on outcome and then working backwards from there, in everything in their life, whether it's their marriage, what kind of parent they're going to be. If you just focus on
Absolutely,
where do I ultimately want to be, what does that look like, write it down, and then just say, okay, how do I get from point A to point B?
Yeah. And like, that's exactly what we're doing right now. One of my businesses we're growing is push button podcasts. And like, I was like, here, we want to hit 40 clients this year. What do I need to do to hit 40 clients? Right. And we back up from that. It's like, how many people do I need on my team? What kind of sales process do we need? What do we need to have in place in order to hit all those things? We just work backwards. And like, I get down to like, okay, here's where I'm at now. And the next thing I need to do is I need to get the website designed. I need to get, I have steps that go from here all the way up to, hitting our 40 client goal this year. Right. And like, it's really, easy is not the right word. It's because it's not easy. You still have to put all the work into it, but it's not like difficult, right? It's not something that's outside of the realm of possibility. It's just, once you start asking yourself those questions, it's a simple matter of just doing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit practically for a second and talk about your hero's tool belt, right? So, maybe you got a big magical hammer like Thor, or a bulletproof vest like your neighborhood police officer, or maybe you just really love how Evernote helps you organize your thoughts. What are some of the tools that you couldn't live without today when you're talking about growing and managing your business, either your newsletter subscribers, your investment, or your venture capitalist business, something that just makes your business run? You couldn't do it without it.
Well, I mean, might sound wrong, or maybe it's not the answer you're looking for, but I would say it's the people that I've placed in my life So maybe it's an Avengers type ensemble here. But
There you go.
certainly, look, I'm very disorganized. I'm horrendous. I hate it. I don't even want to try. So I have a partner who's the most anal person on the planet. I mean, and he annoys the shit out of me because I'm unorganized, but he's organized, and that's important. And then I hate paperwork. That's like my chosen kryptonite. I don't want any paperwork. So I've got another
Yeah,
partner
yeah.
who that's what he went to college for, as far as a finance degree, and he deals with all the subscription forms for these private placements. He deals with all the tax. He deals with all the corporate entities, all that stuff. So I would say it's the people that are around me, and then I have a personal assistant who she sets all these interviews up and coordinates things and does the bookings for flights. So it's really that team around me that is I wouldn't call them a tool belt, but certainly they're what makes all these businesses work. Is that I have placed strategic people in my life who are strong where I am super weak.
Yeah, that's a really powerful point. And it's one of the things that like I just this last year was when I started hiring people, right? So I just had my 1 year anniversary with my first employee. And he's been fantastic. It's changed the face of my business, right? Just by having someone who can shore up the areas that I needed help with. And it did a lot of things for me, right? It unlocks you from doing things that you're not good at, right? It's an interesting thing, right? You see a lot of times people talk about like, hey, you have your strengths and your weaknesses, and if you could bring your weaknesses up just a little bit, you could have a lot of results. But I think the reality is like, if the wealthiest people in the world ignore their weaknesses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they focus on just the thing that they're the strongest at, and they let other people deal with everything else. And I think it's really telling that to hear someone who's doing the kind of work that you're doing, like how important your team is to your success.
Absolutely. I mean, look, and I would tell everybody take it to the next level. When really think about your life and the things that you can get rid of, like grocery shopping or doing the lawn or doing the pool. You can broker these things out to somebody else and then double down on what you're good at and more efficient at. So let's say instead of my wife going grocery shopping, we get a better return on value if somebody else does it. And now she's focused on the children in the homeschool. Instead of me out there cutting grass for whatever, 15, 20 bucks an hour, I can now focus on future money trends or a VC deal where we'll get a much more return on value. So reflect on your life, and especially if you're a small business owner, should you really be the CPA of your business, the web host guy for your business? I mean, should you be all those things? Or if you're a really good salesman, would you be better off running your business on the phone and hiring somebody to run the website and hiring somebody to keep the accounting?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know it's like I've got goals for my life. Like I really like to cook. But I would like cooking to just be a hobby I do on the side. I want to get to the point where I've got like a personal chef, right? Who's making our family's dinners and like, so like all the way down to those kind
Grubhub,
of things. Grubhub, there you go.
get your personal chef.
Yeah. And like well, I have alternate reasons too. I also want to like hire them as personal chef, but I also want them to like teach me.
Mm.
So it's like a culinary school for a cheapskate. Who doesn't really want to go to culinary school. I want to learn from someone. So, but I don't want to do it for my business. So like, I just,
Yeah.
when I can sit down and, I want another lesson, like teach me how to do whatever that was that you just did. But anyways, that's a personal thing, but yeah, like finding those areas in your life that you can pull out and have someone else do. And one of the things, just an encouragement for people who are thinking about that, the thing that held me back the longest from actually hiring people and bringing someone on was thinking in my own head that I couldn't afford them.
Mm.
Right. And it was a mental block I had because I was like, if I hire someone, I'm going to have to then make sure that, because it is a shift in your business. Because now it's not just you that your business has the revenue for, like I have payroll, and I have payroll is the most important thing that I have every month. Right. I have to make sure that it gets met. Because like those people rely on me to make payroll. So it does shift a little bit of your the priorities in your business. But the other thing that happened with that shift was it took so much off of my plate. My business doubled within 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
right? And suddenly affording that person was not just easy, it was like unthinkable that I waited as long as I did.
Sure.
So that's sort of my encouragement. If you're in that space in your business thinking, what can I take off my plate? Just do it. Right. And like, I remember the first month I was like, I'm going to like have to eat this because I don't know where the revenue is going to come from. But if I never do it, I'm never going to hire someone. And, hired someone, and just within the first month, they more than paid for themselves. Um,
Absolutely.
so it's definitely a big win for your business when you start moving up that direction.
Yeah, it forces you to grow too. Just like a regular household, the car needs new tires, but they don't have any money. But guess what? When the car needs new tires, you find a way to find that $500 and you make it
Yeah.
happen.
You make it
Well,
happen.
same thing with employee. It just becomes part of the operation, and you're good.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not nearly as scary as you think it is. And then once you do it, you're like, I can't believe I waited as long as I did. Um, so, and then I've heard that time and time again from people who have, when they start hiring staff and really growing their organization, it changes their business and really allows them to grow exponentially.
Yes.
Um, so, and it's a form of leverage that I think is just fascinating because, like, for me, the thing that I've really focused on this last year with my business is how can I put in an hour's worth of work and get 10 hours of work out of it.
Mm.
So we've done a lot of work with systems and processes, and our business is really, really streamlined right now. And like for the most part, like my like 80% of my business runs itself without me, which a year and a half ago I ran everything.
Mm.
And if I stepped away, the business stopped. And like,
Yeah.
this last week I went to a business mastermind with our group of people. I took 4 or 5 days off, and they come back, everything's running smoothly, right? Like, it's a really good place to be in your business. And then it allows you to remove yourself from the process and actually have it continue to grow.
No,
So
it's a great feeling.
yeah, it's really cool. So talk a little bit about your own personal heroes, right? Frodo had Gandalf, Luke had Obi-Wan, Robert Kiyosaki is Rich Dad. Who were some of your heroes? Were they real life mentors, speakers or authors, peers who were a couple of years ahead of you? And how important were they to what you've accomplished in your life and your business?
Well, my number one would be my dad, because he taught me to never quit. And literally, like, you'd get spanked with a belt if you quit. There was no quitting. So he taught
It's
me
just not optional.
taught me to go all in, that's for sure. I also had a mentor in my life when I was 13 on, who taught me about real estate, and the kind of opened my mind up to doing different things as far as not going to college and stuff. And then Robert Kiyosaki, so lucky that that man wrote that book at the right time. I was young, I was still a teenager, and I read all of his books. And just in the last year, I got to actually interview him, which was really cool. Those three people are probably the most influential people in my life. And later, when it comes to VC, I ended up meeting a gentleman by the name of Keith Newmeyer, and he really taught me how to evaluate these companies and really, really how to kick the tires on these things.
Yeah, that's really cool. Actually, Robert Kiyosaki was my catalyst for getting into the business world as well. I can't remember, it was like 9 or 10 years old. My dad brought home the Rich Dad Poor Dad book, and he was like, "Hey, one of my friends at work gave this to me. I thought you'd enjoy it." And I read that book probably 4 times the first week that I had it, and I became a boy obsessed at that point. And you were talking earlier, you used to sell candy and stuff. But when I was 13, my first business, I was buying candy wholesale from, I got my dad to give me a loan for candy. And I got $50 and went to the Smart and Final down there in Marietta and bought a bunch of big blocks of candy and brought them to the school. And I made about $1,500 selling candy at school before the school authorities shut
Wow.
me down for not having a business license.
It's a nice chunk of change.
Yeah, worked out really well. But yeah, he's definitely been a huge inspiration to me. And my son's just started reading some of his books. We've been listening to him on audiobook and realizing how much of my thought processes and my character and my decision making came from like those early years reading those books from him. So definitely, I agree with you. It was a huge impact on me as well.
Yeah, play the cash flow game with the kids too.
Yeah, we do. We
They'll,
have the my son loves that game. Um,
yeah.
so we've recently they've got a tablet version of it now, so you don't have to like pull all the stuff out. So we played on the tablet, and he likes that game a lot.
Oh, it's awesome.
So,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah. So that one you don't have to like you don't have to have all the money out, like all the paper money. You just
Right.
have like it has like the income sheet, and it does the calculations.
Oh,
Um, so
that's the
it
only way to play then. I didn't know that you could if because the kids one is not so bad, but the adult one is there's so much writing going on. So if
yeah
they that
it takes all the hard part out of the game, the stuff that makes it feel more like work than a game.
yeah,
And it does like the calculations and keeps track of all of your investments and everything for you. And it's free too. Like you can just go right on their website and play the cash flow game on your and we play it at like you have to have a couple of devices because you have to have one device per person. So like my son has his school tablet and I'll pull out my tablet. My wife has her tablet and we'll play the game.
nice.
But yeah, it's super cool, and it definitely helps him start thinking that along those lines. How do you build investments and whatnot? And he's started asking me questions that direction. He's got all sorts of business ideas now. It's kind of fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I want to go ahead and bring it home for our listeners here and talk about your guiding principles. Top one or two principles or actions that you sort of use regularly every day that you think contribute to the success and influence that your companies have now. Maybe something you wish you had known when you had started out on this journey.
My number one principle, and it is over delivering in value. I think that's one of the most important things I can teach my children, teach anybody who works with me, or anything that I do in life, is to over deliver in value. That's principle number one. And principle number two is to be appreciative and grateful and show gratefulness to other people. So I reward people who work with me with plenty of raises. We're a company that does probably 3 to 4 bonuses a year, just wanting to let people know how appreciative I am, whether it's the subscribers, the clients, or the people who work with me. So over delivering and showing a spirit of appreciation.
Yeah, I love that. I like the idea of giving your workers and even your clients, like how can you surprise and delight them, right? And because it really changes the game for people, right? And it's one of the things I've really focused on with my employees is I've only got a few of them, got a small team and it's growing, but how do you make it that I want this company to be something that either they want to work with forever, or they look back on as a very fond time of their life. They really enjoyed working for our organization, and finding ways to do that. Whether it's we have video games we play together on the weekend, like virtual games that our team plays together, because a bunch of them are young gamers and stuff like that. So we try to encourage that and connect things, and or we put together a weekend channel where we share like our adventures and things with each other, just to keep connected and actually make connections with the employees outside of work. And anyways, there's just how do you go just a little bit above and beyond things that they don't see everywhere, right? And if you can bring that to every area of your life, like you were saying, you're with your clients or with your venture capitalists, how do you always think about over delivering? And it probably has a tremendous impact on the results you've created in your businesses over the years. So it's a good thing.
Well, and it's good to corner yourself. As we all know, if you want to have it, it might not have it. But if you have to have it, it'll happen. So if you put yourself in situations that you have to over deliver, it will happen. But if you just say, I'm going to give them a great service, they're going to love it, blah, blah, blah. Well, maybe they will, maybe they won't. But if you put yourself in a situation, man, if I do this for this person, they are freaking going to be a raving fan of mine. And you got to corner yourself. Do that to yourself.
Yeah.
You'll make it happen. Just like the guy who finds the $500 to fix the car that he doesn't have, you'll make it happen.
Yeah, it just it's got to happen, right? It's the cornered dog syndrome, right? The cornered dog will do anything to survive, right? And you just have to figure out. I call those psychological triggers, right? How do you get yourself into a place that you're going to do the things you need to do, right? And give yourself the triggers to make it happen. So that is basically it for the interview. Thank you so much for coming on. I do have one last thing I do with all of my guests. We call it the Heroes Challenge. It's really simple. It's basically this. Do you have someone in your life or in your network that you think has a cool entrepreneurial story? Who are they? First names are fine. And why do you think they should come share their story with our audience?
Oh, I mean, I would say it's Leor Gantz of Wealth Research Group, because 10 years ago when I met him, he was running a small education company in Israel. And now he's traveled the world for the last year and a half with his wife and his daughter because he was able to leverage his knowledge of investing into the public domain. He simply travels the world looking for investment trends. He goes to China, Thailand, Europe, all over. And I don't think he's been home for like 18 months. And he's traveling with a 3-year-old as well. So I would say he's probably has one of the more fascinating stories I've ever heard.
That's really cool. Yeah. And you've probably heard I got a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old who are fighting in the background here. So I know what it's like traveling with kids. So yeah, we'll see if we can connect later about maybe we can get him to come on the show. But thank you so much for coming on the show, Daniel. Really appreciate it. Where can people find you if they're interested in any of the things that you do, right? Whether they got a company that needs venture capitalists or they want to hear about your newsletter, where can they find you, and who are the ideal types of people to reach out?
Anybody. We help millennials. We help baby boomers. It doesn't matter. futuremoneytrends.com. You can subscribe to our weekly wealth digest. If you want to read the intro and the first chapter of my book, Don't Save for Retirement, you can go to futuremoneytrends.com/save.
Awesome. Look forward to, I assume that book's available on Amazon?
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like something I need to go pick up and read. So again, thank you so much for coming on the show, Daniel. Really appreciate it. It's been a fascinating conversation. Is there any final thoughts you have before we hit the done record on this episode?
I think we've covered a lot of ground. The only thing I could say to everybody is just, there's nothing like looking in the mirror and realizing that's your number one source of income, and that's the person who's going to solve all your problems. It doesn't matter what happens to you. It's how you're going to respond to everything.
It's a powerful point. Thank you very much, Daniel. Appreciate having you on.
Thank you.